To hit record. So, welcome again, everyone, to this wonderful workshop we're having. I'm really excited to hear Nick talk about building a better business and living a better life and managing change. So, with that, I'm going to let you, Nick, go ahead and start out by introducing yourself and take it from here.
Terrific. Well, Susanna, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to everybody this morning. Yeah, and as my tagline says, build a better business to live a better life, right? So that's why we're all here. We all want to basically get our businesses to the next level and basically have that impact our life and our family's life and our neighbors' life and our employees' lives and so forth. So a little bit of background on me. I've been an entrepreneur most of my career. I started back in the 80s as a smile and dial stockbroker on Wall Street, and I got into sales management. I was national sales manager for a small independent brokerage firm, actually in Red Bank, New Jersey. Then after I left Wall Street, I came to New Jersey to work and never went back. Started my own brokerage firm in 1996 from zero, and I grew that to had about 250 advisors around the country. Sold that to a private equity firm in 2004. Started another company that was focused on financial technology for trust banks. We had about 50 banks throughout the nation that were using our services. I sold that business in 2011 to LPL Financial. You might be familiar with them, the largest financial services firm, independent financial services firm in the world. So since that time, after I sold my business in 2011, I started working with small to mid-sized business owners. I started Focal Point Business Coaching of New Jersey, really to leverage not only my experience as an entrepreneur, but also to leverage the training and the education I did get by getting certified as a business coach and as an executive coach. And I continue to do that. We believe in Kaizen, where we're all constantly learning, new methods, new strategies. And I spend my time and I built a team. There's five Focal Point coaches in New Jersey. It's probably about 200, 210 around the world. But we spend our time primarily with small to mid-sized business owners, people such as yourself who's on the line today, really helping to get your business to the next level. So with that, let's talk about some goals for today. Okay, as a business coach, we're focused on goals always. And as I said, as advertised, we want to develop absolute clarity in your business strategy. And we're also going to want to spend some time learning how to reduce some resistance to change. And developing absolute clarity or real clarity is really the key to success in business. Before we begin any process, we need to create a solid strategy. And that has to be based on real information. Where are we at today? Where do we want to go? What's in our way? Why aren't we there already? What constraints do we have? What resources do we have access to? Who do we have to meet? What do we have to put in place? We have to have absolute clarity, at least as much clarity as possible at this moment, in order to really effectuate change in our businesses. And obviously with change, very often comes some tension and stress and anxiety. So we really do have to learn not only how to put a strategy in place, but also, how to overcome resistance to change. We all have that. As individuals, our staff will have it. Anybody who has gone through change, it creates some anxiety. And the last thing we need these days is more anxiety, right? We have enough things. So this is great that the microphones are available and so forth. It's a small group today. I normally, do my presentations like everybody in person, and we've all had to pivot our businesses. So I, like everybody else, had to get used to now talking to my clients and so forth, via the internet. So please feel free at any time. If you have questions, just fire away. All right. So build a better business, live a better life. I live on this. I talk to my clients all the time about that, but there's really a problem with that. And the problem is we're all really busy. We were busy before the pandemic started. And we're busy with what? Servicing clients, sales, marketing, accounting, all the things that go into a business. We're busy. And the day takes on a life of its own and winds up controlling us as opposed to us controlling our day. So what do we tend to do then? We tend to start to work faster, start to work harder, put in more hours to try to make up for all the things that we're doing. So to overcome that, I work with my clients, and this is really where I'd like you to focus today on putting together a good strategic plan, because a good strategic plan is designed not for you to do more. In fact, it's designed for you to do less, all right? Work less, but work on the things that are most important. And we have to identify what that is. One of the things I learned in my career running, starting and running businesses, that anything is possible, but everything is not. We can't do it all. We have to be able to focus our energies, okay, and really understand what's the most important thing I should be working on right now. Talk about being in a fog, right? We all run businesses. We all basically have, we put our head down and we're constantly working. We're technicians. We're doing what we have to do. Throw in there a pandemic, all right? It creates more fog. It's not clear. Throw in a hurricane. I was just telling Susanna, we lost our power yesterday. I just got it back 5 o'clock this morning, so I wasn't sure how available I was going to be even for today. There's all these different things that cloud our judgment, cloud our focus, and we don't take the time to rise above it. We're always working. So one of the things you need to do as a business owner is you have to spend that time, the critical thinking time, and try to rise yourself above the fog and start to look down on your business. All right. It's a very important component. I'm going to teach you a little bit today on how to do that. There's some structural methods that allow you to get a little bit more focused and help you rise above the fog and focus on your business. We don't always want to be reactionary to what's going on in the world. We want to basically be focusing on what's going to get us there. So speaking of getting us there, I sit down with a lot of business owners, and a lot of people are not tracking, okay, what's important. They don't know the score of the game. That's key element, and we'll talk about this a little bit today on keeping score. You don't want to get to the end of the quarter or at the end of the year and realize you lost, okay? You didn't achieve your goals. You want to have different measurable things you could be looking at throughout the course of the year. So we want to talk about metrics, okay? We don't want to get crazy with these, okay? There's only a handful of metrics that are important to small business owners. But because we're playing hard every day, we don't necessarily spend the right amount of time actually looking at what's important. And as I mentioned, I don't want to get to the end of the quarter or end of the year and then realize I didn't get there. If you're football fans at all, you might know Bill Belichick, the coach of the New England Patriots. He's known for his ability to make adjustments at halftime. Okay, so one of the reasons why New England has been so successful as a football team is that, at halftime, he takes an assessment as to what's been going on, and he makes adjustments for the second half, and they wind up winning. We need to do that as business owners also. We need to know where we're at, okay, as we move forward, down the road. Because if we don't, we may never get to where we want to go, right? We hear statements like, well, success is the journey, all right, not the destination. Well, I hear that, okay, and it's nice, but the journey doesn't pay my bills, right? We have to focus on the destination. We have to focus on what's important. What are the successes we're looking to achieve? I want to be sure that my clients and you, individual, depending on the business you're in, you might be a solopreneur, you might be running a larger organization, that you actually have a plan and that you know how to keep score so that you do get there. So, all right, so today's the opportunity to sit down and clearly define where you want to go. All right, your goals, your vision for the future, and to put a plan in place. And as Susanna said earlier today, as a business coach, okay, I take it to heart that people are paying attention, right? We want to get the most out of today's session. You want to wring out as much as you can. So if you can, quiet your phones. If you are eating, that's fine, that's great. But we want to get as much as we can out of today's session. I'm going to hit you with a lot of information today. And I'm also going to give you homework, because no good business coach worth his salt or her salt leaves a session without proactive homework. So you're going to get some homework at the end of today, and I hope you do it. And if you have trouble with it, okay, I'm available to talk to afterwards. All right. So first we want to talk about is strategy. Why do we need strategy? Well, it creates power. It's a lever. All right. idea behind getting the most out of our day is really to be strategic in everything we do. And if you don't have a written strategic plan, you don't have a document to go back to. You don't have a methodology, okay, to refer back to remind you of the things you should be doing. I talk to my clients about the Constitution, the U.S. Constitution, and it's a document that was written. That was a plan, okay? It was the great experiment, right? It was a plan. And how many times over the past 240, 250 years have we gone back to take a look at that plan, right? You need the same thing for your business to be successful. You need to have your own constitution. And because you can't do everything. Like as I mentioned, we have to be doing what's important. So you have to get into the concept and accept the fact that strategy creates power. Strategy creates leverage, and it gives you the opportunity to do the things you should be doing. Because we're all going to come across challenges. You know, we have bad weather, we have plagues, we have, you name it these days, there's challenges that come our way. So we need to have that document, okay, to remind us as to really where do we want to go. You know, every sea captain will tell you that they're constantly changing course, right? The waves, the wind, whatever it might be, the currents are going to put a pressure on where they want to go. But they adjust the sails, all right? They make adjustments, but they're always going back to their manifest and to the plan as to where they want to end up, all right? So the bottom line is we're going to, at the end of today's session, I hope that you have enough information and enough confidence to basically adjust the sails. For when the winds change, you can adjust the sails on your plan. I like to use railroad tracks. You're going to see a lot of, my clients know I use a lot of metaphors. So railroad tracks, okay, are awesome, okay, when we talk about strategy and business planning, because they start at point A and they end up at point B, and there's a straight path to go through, right? It might go around mountains, it might go over bridges, but the bottom line is they're on rails. And the strategy, okay, you want to put in place is your railroad track, all right? You start at point A and you want to be at point B. The idea here, though, is that each one of these little ties, okay, are measurable events along your railroad track. And you want to be sure you're clearly defining not only where you're at today and where you want to go, but what railroad ties, what measurable events do you need to get to on your way to your final destination. So you'll hear me talk a little bit today about railway tracks, okay, because we want to get your tracks laid down, and we want to be sure that you know how to get back on your track if you happen to get bumped off. Maybe your cow crosses, okay, maybe the wind blows you over, okay, but the bottom line is we want to get you back on track. So the big idea for today, okay, is strategy comes before tactics, all right? Strategy is always over tactics, and the slide is set up that way specifically for that. I can't tell you how many times I meet with a new client that everybody likes to then, you know, show up and throw up all the things that they're doing, right? I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this, all these little tactics in here. And then they start to talk about their strategy, and just coincidentally, their tactics are being jammed into a strategy as opposed to the other way around. You want to start with the strategy and then determine which tactics will get you there. All right. It's a subtle difference, okay, with respect to the semantics, but it's key to building your business. The tactics are a function of the strategy, not the other way around. I'll take a breath there. Anybody have any questions so far? If there are any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Well, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Can you, I don't know if you're going to do this in a minute, but can you give us a kind of an example that's a definition between a strategy and a tactic? I know some people are saying, well, I don't have enough clients, so I'm going to do a whole bunch of stuff on social media. Like, and I think that that's going straight to the tactic without understanding the strategy first. Can you, if you weren't going to do it before, can you walk through just like one example?
Yeah, sure. And it is part of the presentation today.
Okay.
Your strategy has to be a function of the vision of where you want to take not only your business, but your life. And you put a strategy in place to do that. And the strategy is going to be goals. It's going to be projects. It's going to be activities you need to do. But say I'm going to, you know, start a social media marketing campaign, okay, is a tactic within a strategy. The strategy is to get more clients. The strategy is to expand your distribution base. The strategy is going to be something that's going to get you to where you want to be 1, 3, 5, 7, 10 years down the road. That's the strategy we want to look at. The tactics are going to be the little activities you do to get yourself there. And I think, Susanna, it'll become a little more clear as I get through some of the other slides. One of my favorite quotes of all time: now is better than perfection. A good plan violently executed right now is better than a perfect plan next week. George Patton. All right. General Patton knew, okay, that the mere fact that we attack, we move forward, okay, is so much more important. Even if it's not the perfect plan, you're better off doing it today than waiting and analyzing and analyzing and analyzing. You don't want to get paralysis by analysis. We all heard that, right? So we want to create a plan, okay, that is simple enough that we can act upon. I know too many people who have spent so much time putting together business plans, okay, and they never get to do the work that they talk about doing in the business plan, and they want to put it on a shelf and it never happens. So what we want to do is create a business plan that basically is going to be used. So I'm a long-winded person, okay? And one of the things I tell my clients, we have a little saying, it's called ESMO. In fact, I even give them some of them a little card, ESMO. And that's enough said, move on, Nick. All right, that's what it stands for, ESMO. However, I think I've spent a fair amount of time here talking to you about the importance of a strategic plan. I cannot emphasize it enough that you have to spend the critical thinking time on the plan. And it has to be simple, all right? If it's not simple, number one, you won't do it. If you think this is going to be a big project, all right, you're not going to do it. You don't have the time, you might not have the energy, you might not have the know-how. It might frighten you, okay? So the plan should be simple. Also, if it's too complicated, you probably won't follow the plan. So we need to have a plan, okay, that is simple. We're going to talk about building a one-page business plan that you're not only going to follow, it's going to dictate your daily activities. It's also going to be something you can share with your staff, with your spouse, with your mentor. It's a plan that will basically drive all of your activities. So there's 5 key principles to building a successful plan. And 80% of your success is going to come down to clarity. The more time we can spend on clearly defining where we are, where we want to go, and so forth, that is where your success is going to come from. Another thing I found over the years is that 95% of the anxiety that I've had, or even my clients experience, is the times when there's lack of clarity, right? When we don't know what's coming next. We're living it right now, right? We're all going through this pandemic. Nobody knows when life is going to get back to normal and what that new normal looks like. It creates anxiety. So the more clarity we can have in our business model, okay, in the focus that we have for our company, the less anxiety and stress we will have, because we'll have that document to go back to guide our principles and to guide our activities. So you want to clearly define the business. And let's go through a little bit of an exercise right now and start to clearly define our business. This is not a worksheet yet. We do have some worksheets we'll get into. This is something that if you have a pad and paper in front of you, pad and pencil in front of you, you might want to just jot down, or you can revisit it on the recording. But you want to ask yourself some key questions. What business am I in? All right, what business are you actually in? Going back to the railroad analogy, if you asked the railroad executives years ago what business they were in, they'd say, well, we're in the railroad business. When in fact, they're in the transportation.
Moving people from spot to.
I'm sorry, question out there?
No.
Okay, if there is, stop me. ESMO, just tell me ESMO, got it. What business am I in? If they're not in the railroad business, they're in the transportation business, right? And then along comes aircraft, along comes the shipping, all the different things that they're competing with, all right? They're in the transportation business. So I look at myself, I'm in the growth business, all right? I help people grow. I'm not a business coach. I am a business coach, okay? But the way I think about my business is I'm in the growth business. I want you to grow your business so you can grow your life, so you can grow your family's life, your community's life. We're in a growth business, so think bigger. Don't just think narrowly the niche that you're in. What business are you actually in? Next question is, what business might I be in? All right, this is a question that's being asked a lot right now because of the need to pivot, okay, that we're all doing right now. What business might I be in? sitting at a restaurant, just the other night and looking around and they're looking at the tent you're sitting under. Okay. Now these people who were renting tents were really pretty much focused on parties, private parties and so forth. And all of a sudden we have a pandemic and people are renting tents, every single restaurant you can think of. Okay. So now they're in the restaurant business. Okay. Their clientele has shifted. Okay. From people putting big parties in the backyards to every restaurant you can think of who needs to make a living. All right. What business might I be in? What service can I provide? What additional product should I be adding to my equation? What business should I be in? Who's my competition? All right. As I mentioned before, the railroad executive, his competition was not just other railroad companies. It was shipping companies. It was aircraft companies. Who's your competition? All right. It's not just companies doing the same thing you're doing. All right. If you own a restaurant, an Italian restaurant, your competition is not just other Italian restaurants, right? It's other restaurants, period. Okay. It's people who are selling not only hamburgers, okay, but they're selling, poke bowls and they're selling, whatever. All right. Who is your competition? What are they doing that's going well that you can observe? All right. Don't get so myopic on the business that you're currently in. You have to think broader. In order to really get clarity as to where you can be taking your business, think a little bit more broadly, okay, who your competition is. Who are your customers? Again, don't think so narrowly. I like to spend time talking to my clients about creating an avatar of exactly who their customer is. How old are they? What do they look like? Do they have children? Where do they vacation? What do they read? Where do they go? Okay. Who are your customers? The more you can hone in on who your customer is, the more you can direct your messaging to them. Also, who are your best customers? And what's a best customer? That's somebody who's going to give you a very solid net promoter score. It's somebody who's going to give you a referral. It's somebody who gives you energy. All right. And I don't think we think about that often. If you're in the services business, okay, you really want to draw energy from those sessions. I know I do. When I sit down with a new client, I'm sizing up somebody, whether I want to do business with them or not. I really think about, is this person going to be a drag on me? Are they going to sap my energy? Okay. So who are my best customers? I want somebody who's going to give me a good testimonial. Okay. Who's going to basically go out there and on Yelp or wherever it might be and give me a good review. Those are my best customers, and how do I get them? So spend time clearly identifying the avatar, okay? And the easiest way of doing that is just going through your clientele right now, your customers right now, and identifying 1, 2, or 3 of them that say, you know what, I wish I had 100 of these people, okay? And then start to identify, what does that person look like? What do they eat? Where do they go? What do they like to do for a living? What are the things that they're doing? All right, so spend the time doing this. This is all part of the clarity questions, okay, that you need to ask as far as what your business is about. Another thing I like to talk to people about is identifying your area of excellence. What are you really good at? If you read Jim Collins, he talks about you want to be the best in the world at what you do. Now, that's a pretty big statement, but you know what? I'm the best business coach in the world. I believe that, okay? I believe that. Now, the world is not the world. The world is my world, okay? The world is the people I'm talking to right now, the people who I have access to, the people who I want to market to. Who is your world, all right? How do you become the best in your world? What is your area of excellence? Are you a good public speaker? All right. Do you have a product or a service that's better, faster, cheaper than somebody else's? What are you good at? Do people like you and you can ingratiate them and you basically draw them into your organization? What's your area of excellence? All right. We call it area of awesomeness. At Focal Point, we have our own little terminologies. What's your area of awesomeness? There's certain things that I'm awesome at, some things that I'm awkward at, some things that I'm awful at. All right. I don't want to do the awful things. I want to focus on the things I'm awesome at. That's where I'm going to draw my energy. That's when I feel good about myself. So think about what are you really good at? And we want to do more of that. And we'll talk about that shortly. And then what are your constraints? What's holding you back? At this point, what's holding you back? All right. I like to sit there and say, okay, why aren't you there already? You have these goals, you have these things you want to do. Why aren't you there already? What's holding you back? It's the easiest way to identify what's holding you back. I need more capital. I need more knowledge in a particular area. Maybe I need to learn Okay, something new, there's a gap in my business. What do I need to do? What's holding me back right now? Think about that. And I'm going to give you a worksheet or two before the session's over to help you with that thought process and do that brainstorming. You know, and the last question I'd like to talk about on clarity is, where am I on the sigmoid curve? Now, you might not know what that is, okay? And you probably don't. But Susanna talked about it earlier, and it's really where SCORE tends to focus. It's the life cycle of a business, all right? SCORE is your partner, your mentor for the life cycle of your business, so for the life of your business. I think that's what you said earlier. Every business has a life cycle, all right? We all go through what's known as the sigmoid curve. It's like a lazy S that rolls across the paper. And this is, along the bottom is time, and along the left are resources. We all start all excited about our business, okay? We might not have any customers, but we're very excited about our business, all right? And we're all looking to take our business to the next level. But we inevitably go through phases. The first phase we go through is the learning phase. This is where we're making a lot of mistakes. I know I did. When I first started my business, and I had 5 businesses, you learn, okay? You make less mistakes the more businesses you start, I can tell you that, especially if you get a mentor or you're working with somebody. You learn from other people's mistakes, but you have to go through a learning phase before you can go into a growth phase. What do I need to learn? And I talked about that on the last slide, right? What do I need to learn before I can grow? What's the gap? Eventually, every business goes through a decline phase. So we have to identify, if we're really truly being honest with ourselves, where are we on this curve? Because there's an opportunity phase that enters the equation. We all have an opportunity to reinvent ourselves, to make changes, to pivot. So there's 4 phases. We have a learning phase, a growth phase, a decline phase. Every business will get there if they don't reinvent themselves. They need to identify where they're at. You need to identify, where are you at personally? Where's your business at? Where's your staff at? Where's your product at? Where's your service at? They're all on a life cycle. Do things have to change? Do you have to upgrade certain people? Do you have to upgrade certain products? Where are you? Critical thinking time is so important during the course of your week, and schedule it. On Tuesday at 2 o'clock, I'm going to spend 30 minutes. I'm going to think about where I'm at on the life cycle of my business. What do I need to learn? Where am I at? Am I in an opportunity phase? Okay, do I need to reinvent something right now? Where am I at? Again, I'll take a breath. Any questions there? That makes sense. Okay.
Well, we're following you.
I'm sorry, somebody there?
I was just saying, no, I'm understanding what you're saying. I'm listening.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Sometimes when you do these, you do feel like you're talking into the abyss, but I appreciate that. Okay, so let's move on. Let's ask some strategic questions. So those were clarity questions that we went through. Okay, let's now start to ask some strategic questions about ourselves. All right, and the first one is values. Okay, what is your added value? Okay, what are your strengths? What are you really good at? I talked about areas of excellence, areas of awesomeness. What strategically do you add? What value do you add to the equation? What's your vision for your business? And I always like to say, what's your vision for your life? Okay, because most people that I work with, their business is just a tool to get them to where they want to be in life. All right, it's a means to the end. It's not, they don't wake up in the morning and get all excited necessarily, okay, about just the business. It's where the business is going to take them in life. So think about your vision. And I always say, start with the ideal and we'll work backwards from there. What's perfect, right? 3 years from now, 5 years from now, if everything went absolutely perfect, what's the ideal vision you have? And let's work backwards from there. Might not all be possible, okay? It might not all be realistic, but let's take a look at it. What's your mission? What's your what? What do you do? Okay? Well, I work with business owners, okay? That's what I do, all right? My mission is to leave behind a better business owner than the person I found, so that they truly are able to run their business, okay, after we've finished our engagement. Same holds true with SCORE, I assume, right? You want to create better business people. It's the mission of what we're about. The purpose, okay, my why, we're going to talk about very shortly, okay? But why do I get up in the morning? Why do I do this? Okay, why do I have passion for this? You know, and I can tell you it's changed. When I was building my other businesses, my purpose was to really provide a financial security net for my family. Okay, that was my purpose. I got up in the morning, I wanted to make money and create a financial security net. I didn't come from a lot of money. I wasn't poor, but I didn't come from a lot of money. And I just knew that if I can create this financial security net, all right, for my wife, for my kids, all right, I'd feel good about myself. That was my purpose. That was my why. You know what? I achieved a lot of that. My why is now working with folks such as yourself. So we're going to talk about identifying what your why is in a little bit more detail in just a moment. In fact, I'm sure Susanna is familiar with Simon Sinek, who we'll talk about just briefly. What are your goals? Okay. And I like to say, what are your goals for the next year? Let's break it down easy. Okay. If you and I were to sit down, today's August 5th, 2020. If we were to sit down August 5th, 2021, and I asked you a question, how was your year? And you came back and was awesome, had an excellent year. What happened during those 12 months for you to be able to make that statement? I had a great year. All right. What is your goal? Okay. What do you want to be August 5th, 2021? All right. That's a question. If you were to say I had a great year, what had to happen for you to make that statement? It's a great way of just forcing yourself to think about specific goals. All right. You can call me August 5th, 2021. All right. Tell me I had a great year. All right. Bottom line is I want to know what happened. What knowledge and skill do I need to learn? We talked about this on the sigmoid curve, right? Before you can grow, you have to learn. What's the gap right now? What other knowledge and skill? Do you have to learn Excel? Do you have to learn how to run a CRM system? Do you need to know a little bit more about social media marketing? All right, what do you need to learn? What skill do you need to develop? What habits do you need to change? All right, or develop? You know, you might be a procrastinator. Okay, it's a habit. All right, I know I went through that. You have to make a change. Right? You might be, you might have trouble with time management in general. All right, it actually becomes part of your character. You become known as somebody who's a procrastinator. Okay, you have to think about and become honest with yourself and say, no, I have to change this. All right, and how am I going to do that? All right, well, you're going to do that through daily actions. You're going to change things incrementally, okay, on a daily basis. And that will change your habits, which will change your character, okay? It'll impact your goals, and it'll get you to a point in life where you want to be. But these are strategic questions that you need to ask yourself. You know, what are my strengths? What's my ideal life look like? And so forth. You come down the list, and you will make some incremental changes. So I always like to tell people, and I by the way, that's me in that picture. I'm just kidding. I wish that was me in that picture. You want to play to your strengths. When I sit down with a client for the first time, I'm really more interested in what they're really good at as opposed to what they need to improve. All right. You want to play to your strengths, but as we talked about, first you have to identify what they are. So we're going to our first worksheet. All right. And I call it a strengths worksheet. And it's an interesting worksheet because it's almost just the opposite, because it says weaknesses on the left, right? So most people have a lot of trouble, okay, taking their perceived weaknesses and turning it into a strength. And I think that's a very important thing to do. For example, you know, one of the weaknesses, you know, somebody might come up with, well, we're really small, okay? We're a small company in a large industry, all right? Well, some people come back and say, well, yeah, we're small, but we have 6 offices in 4 states. Well, that doesn't say anything to me as a consumer. All right. But if I came back and I spun, yeah, we're small, but we're the most nimble, personable boutique in the industry. And that's the reason why we stay small. Right. If you want to take what you perceive, a question that might be asked of you that you're not necessarily comfortable answering, what is that perceived weakness? And let's turn that into a strength. All right. So you're always working with strengths. You have no weaknesses when you go through this exercise. You take what you have and you turn it into a strength. I had a relatively new insurance agent come to me, And I was coaching him. And one of the things he said is, one of the things I have a trouble with is people say, well, how long have you been doing this? And reality was he was doing it about 9 months. And he was very, very hesitant to answer that question. So I said, but before you joined, and I'll leave the names out, XYZ agency, what did you do? He says, well, I researched all these other agencies. I took a look at the products. I took a look at the support staff. And I decided that this agency, okay, basically gave me the best service, okay, and the best products if I was going to build a career in the insurance business. And I said, well, doesn't that sound a lot better than, yeah, I know I'm only in the business 9 months, but I'm still learning, but I have good ideas. Talk about, yeah, I spent months researching all of the different insurance agencies, all of the different products, the support staffs, because I know my success is going to be a function of who I'm surrounding myself with. And that's the reason why I decided to join XYZ. So think about the questions you might have that come to you from clients or from customers, all right? Questions that you might not be, and let's turn them into strengths, all right? And you are able to identify your own personal strengths, your areas of awesomeness, but I want you to think about even the weaknesses, your perceived weaknesses, how they can be turned into strengths. So you're not going to do it now. If we were in one of my sessions, we'd do it together. But the bottom line is spend some time, do a little bit of a brain drain on the left side there, and write down what are some of the questions you get that you feel like might be perceived as weaknesses. Any questions with that? Does that make sense? Okay, I'll take no response. There's no questions. All right, so we talked about why. What's your why? What's your purpose? Why do you get up in the morning and do what you want to do? If you're not familiar with Simon Sinek, all right, you should be. All right, Simon Sinek is one of the brightest business minds, one of the brightest performance coaches that are out there right now. And he wrote several books. One is Start With Why. But he became really hot in the coaching circles, if you will, when he did his TED Talk. And his TED Talk is What's Your Why? And this is the link to get there. And but all you have to do is just Google Simon Sinek, S-I-N-E-K, What's Your Why? And it'll take you to his TED Talk. And what Simon says, it's the first time I said that. What Simon says, do this. What Simon says is people don't buy what you do. They buy why you do it, right? I'll say that again. People don't buy what you do. They buy why you do it. They want to hear the passion in your voice, right? They want to understand that they can identify with you. They want to know that you care about what they care about, that you are aligned, okay, with respect to what you do, all right? And he goes through a whole, and I won't bore you with it because I'd really like you to go to this link and listen to the TED Talk. And he'll talk about specifically the differences between, an Apple computer, okay, and a run-of-the-mill computer company, and how they think differently, and how people come to them differently, and how people wait in line for hours and hours and hours and pay ridiculous sums of money for the next product that comes out. And they're not a computer company, okay? They make people more efficient. They make people feel better about themselves because of their products, all right? Their why, okay, is much different, okay, than the run-of-the-mill company. So we're going to do an exercise, all right? This is a hard one. This is not one you're going to do in 5 minutes. This is one you're going to do over and over again, frankly. And that's the reason why I have it broken out the way I do. The why statement worksheet, okay? Hopefully you printed these out. If you didn't, that's okay. You can do it later. But it's designed to help you articulate what your why is. Now, you might have it in your heart, you might have it in your head, what your why is. But you know what? You have to be able to tell your client or your prospective client or customer, okay, to get them to buy into your why. So the sheet is designed, and I want you to look at it in 3 columns, even though it looks like 9 boxes. It's 3 columns, and you want to start with, I believe, a very broad, whoops, go back there. I believe a very broad statement. Now, there are a number of examples I can give you. I have a client who said, I believe that IT has the potential to totally revolutionize services. And they wrote that in here. Okay, big, broad picture. Okay, I believe that IT can revolutionize services. Then I went down to here and I said, okay, let's refine it a little bit more. I believe that business owners shouldn't waste their time trying to understand and manage the tools that they use. I believe that if they can focus on what they do best and not worry about the IT, they will be much more successful. All right. And as you can see, it starts with a big, broad statement that I believe that IT will revolutionize services. I believe that business owners that are in these services should not be spending time thinking about and trying to learn all these different technologies, that they should hire this company I was working with. All right. Because if they do, they'll be able to focus on exactly what they do best. How am I doing for time, by the way? I'm sorry. Okay. For me, okay, so before I get to mine, so this is your first version, all right? So try it, okay, and keep refining it. Then you go to version 2, and then you go to version 3, and keep working on this until you really can come out of your heart and your brain and able to articulate to people why you do what you do, okay? When I started doing mine, it took me a little bit of time, but I really got to the point where, you know what? I believe that small businesses are the foundation of a healthy local economy. That goes in this box. I believe that small business owners with slightly better tools and mindset can make a dramatic impact to their bottom line. That goes in this box. I believe that because of additional profits to their bottom line, they can live a better life. Not only their life, but their employees and their family. That's my why statement. All right. So you need to spend some time to not only understand your passion, be able to articulate your passion. Because when you are standing in a networking event or whatever the case might be, you want to have that passion come through. And these words will naturally flow off your tongue once you do this exercise. Okay? Good with that?
I'm sorry, I have a question. So when you're saying version 1, version 2, version 3, what lets you go from one version to another? Like what makes you feel that the version 1 isn't the complete version?
Got it. Perfect. You're probably not going to nail it the first time you do it. Okay, you're probably not going to nail it. It's not either. It's going to be awkward to say, or it's not even going to be 100% accurate, right? So you want to just try it first. Throw something down on paper, all right, and create a version 1 and say, all right, you know what? I can say that probably more concisely, okay, in version 2, all right, and you do it again, and you take each paragraph. I believe big picture. I believe a little bit more narrow. I believe result, right? This is the business I'm in, okay? This is what I do. This is the results I get, okay? However you want to think about it, but it has to be your why statement, all right? And when you listen to Simon Sinek's TED Talk and you take out this worksheet afterwards, you'll effectively be able to do this, all right? But it's going to take several versions because you're not going to nail it on your first one, all right? So just keep refining it and make it easy for you to say. You know, I can say mine and, you know, like that all the time. It's like your elevator pitch, right? You practice it and practice it, but you might have passion about what you do, but if you can't articulate it, it's not going to help you. All right. Let me start to get into the 1-page flight plan. Again, I like to use an airplane. Did you know that a plane is 90% of the time is off course, right? It leaves Newark Airport, goes out to San Francisco 90% of the time. It's off course. They're constantly making adjustments. That's where the autopilot comes in. And depending on the wind, depending on whatever, air pressures, they're constantly making adjustments. All right. Same holds true with your plan. You're going to make adjustments. It's not going to be perfect the first time. But you know what? You know where you are and you know where you want to go. Newark to San Francisco. All right. And we're going to make adjustments as we get there. All right. But we have to identify those 2 places, point A and point B first, and then we're going to build our plan. So why 1 page? Well, as I mentioned earlier, it's easy to do. Number 2, it's easy to understand. It's easy to implement. It's easy to monitor. It's easy to make adjustments. And most importantly, at least in my opinion, it's easy to share. All right. I have clients that take the 1-page business plan and it goes on everybody's desk. They understand exactly what the vision of the company is. All right. And they know exactly what they have to do and where they fit into the piece of the equation. All right. So a one-page business plan, okay, is a key to a small business owner. Now, you're not going to take that and give it to the bank and try to get an SBA loan. Okay. They're going to want more of a business model. All right. They're going to want their Excel spreadsheet with the projections and all the other good things that go into this. But to run your business on a daily basis, that business plan is not going to work. All right. That's one that you give it to the bank. Okay. And it probably goes in the drawer. Maybe you look at it next year. All right. You want a business plan that's going to be on your desk and you're going to look at every single day. So first step to do this, and we're getting towards the end here, is you want to, again, start with point A. What's your reality? Okay, where am I at? You're going to go through all those exercises we talked about a little bit earlier. All right. Over here, you want to put a B. This is point B. Okay, we're going from Newark to San Francisco. All right, this is exactly where you want to be in 3 years. And these are the things we have to overcome. What's stopping me from getting there? All right. Again, that's another clarity exercise to help you think through your one-page business plan. And how simple is this? All right. This is designed, okay, really to basically keep on the corner of your desk. You have to start with what was on page, what was B right here, all right? My 3-year vision. I'm going to stick it here. What do I want my life to look like? What do I want my business to look like? What am I selling? All right. Where am I living? How much money am I making? What vacations am I going to be going on in 3 years? As much of a clear vision you can actually create should be in here in bullets. All right. I'm going to be doing $18 million in sales. We're going to have 16 locations. I'm going to be living in a $2 million home. I'm going to be going to France. Create the vision board. I mean, we all, I'm sure we all heard about making vision boards. Okay. You want your 3-year vision as vivid in here as possible, because the next question is going to be, what do I have to do over the next 12 months that's going to be consistent with getting me to my 3-year vision? What's the shorter term? What's the railroad tie that I have to hit in 1 year that's going to help me get to my vision in 3 years? All right. And again, that's going to be probably a little bit more metric oriented. It's going to be, how many clients do we need, or how many customers do I have to have, and what am I doing in sales, and how many new accounts do I have to have on board, or for a financial advisor, how many assets under management? All the things I need to do that's going to get me to my 3-year vision. All right. They're your goals. And I could spend literally days on this one page. Okay. But this is a game changer, because I'm going to tell you why it's going to be a game changer in just a minute. So you go with your 3-year vision, you create your 12-month goals, and now we have to create our 90-day projects. And this gets back to, what do I need to learn? What do I need to do? What do I need to create over the next 90 days that's going to allow me to get to my 12-month goals? What projects do I need to do? Who do I need to meet? Who do I need to hire? Who do I need to have a strategic alliance with? Right? What project? And it doesn't have to be a lot. It could be 2 or 3 things in here. All right, 2 or 3 key elements of achieving success on your 12-month goals. All right, so it's projects drive to your goals. Your goals will get you to your vision. This is really where the magic comes in, because your 7-day actions, okay, and this is designed really, you can take a Post-it note, and you can put a Post-it note right here. I have clients who take the 1-year business plan and they laminate it with the first 3 boxes filled in. And every quarter they change it, but every week they're putting in their 7-day actions on a Post-it note, right? And what this does, and this is not your to-do list. These are specific actions that you need to take that is going to move your projects forward. All right. This is strictly focused on your projects, not your to-do list, not your emails you have to answer, and all the other stuff you have to do as a business owner. These are specific actions you need to take this week to accomplish what you want to accomplish in 90 days. The beauty of this is you have to look at it every 7 days. All right. Every 7 days, you're reminding yourself of the projects, your goals, and your vision, because you never want to take your eye off your destination. All right. And it also is going to force you to think about, well, you know what? Maybe I do have to make an adjustment. Okay. Yeah. We had a pandemic. Where'd that come from? Right. We have to make some adjustments. But if we're not even looking at where we expect it to go, we're not going to think about what we might have to pivot. Right. So the bottom line is, this is a This is a game changer for many of my clients where they are forcing themselves to look at their projects, their goals, and their vision every single week. And they're putting down specific actions they're going to do, and they commit to do it. I even have one of these that requires a signature, okay, that they are committing to do those 7-day actions. This is a game changer. Do this, keep it on your desk, look at it. I don't care if it's Sunday night or Monday morning or Friday afternoon at 2. All right. But you have to look at it every week and update your actions. What are you going to do? It's going to move the needle on this project. All right. I'll take another breath there. This is important. Okay. Any questions on this? Okay. I'm not getting paid by the hour, so I don't care. You can keep me.
Oh, wait. I have a question.
Go ahead, Evie.
All right. Just not even a question, but just kind of a statement. That was really like a light bulb went off. That was a good aha moment for me because I never really looked at separating like action steps versus tasks on a to-do. Like you said, instead of a to-do list, like an action list. That was actually, that gave me a lot of clarity.
Absolutely. There's a difference, right? And that's what happens in our businesses. We get caught up in doing all the daily tasks and we lose focus on doing the things that are important.
Exactly.
Right?
I think that is something, yeah, wow. Okay. So that's something where I definitely need to work on that. So what was the suggestion? It was to laminate the paper, but then look at the last box as a weekly.
Yeah, and I mean, you can laminate it. You don't have to laminate it, obviously, but because you're not necessarily going to be changing the 90-day project every week. You're going to be doing that quarterly. Now, don't get me wrong. You might achieve those projects quicker than you think, and then feel free to throw another one on there. Okay, but the bottom line is the ability to take a look at those project goals and vision every week should drive your actions. All right. So yeah, you can just fill in these 3, laminate it, and then put a Post-it note in this corner every week.
That's what I was kind of saying. The intention is that the laminated portion doesn't move. Like that's the foundation, and then what is the movement is the Post-it note. So that's cool. All right, beautiful. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
No, great question. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Nick, Debbie Stout.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Was Debbie you said?
Yes. Mm-hmm. With this one page, who could look at ours, or do you have an example that we could look at?
I don't have one in my presentation, but yeah, if you want to send me an email at the end, or just send me an email at the end. My email address will be up on the end here, and I'll be more than happy to do that.
I'm coming in on a phone, so I can't see your email.
Okay. So why don't you give me your email address? There's only a few of us here. If you don't mind sharing it with everybody.
My email? Okay,
yeah.
Thank you. D Stout.
G.
D is in David. S is in Sam. T O U T at legal LEGAL shield SHIELD associate.com.
Got it.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. You'll get it tonight.
Great presentation.
Thank you.
Great presentation. Thank you.
Well, we're going to come to the last section now, and this is my secret formula. So I charge a lot of money for this one typically. Gleich's formula for change. This has been an eye opener, and talk about aha moments, Evie. This one was really one that I took to heart, and I teach this to all of my clients. Gleich's formula for change is actually it's actually a scientific formula that's been adopted into or adapted, I should say, into the business world. And don't get nervous because it's a mathematical formula, but it's D times V times F is greater than R. And what that means is D is dissatisfaction. In order for you to overcome resistance to change, there has to be some level of dissatisfaction at the moment, or pain. I like to say pain sometimes, but there has to be some sort of dissatisfaction. The V stands for vision. You have to have that vision as to where you're going. Why are you making the change? What's going to get better? If you're trying to get a staff member to change their habits, what's in it for them? Why should they change? You have to give them a vision as to, if they make this change, why it will be better. So you have to have a vision. The F stands for first steps. All right. What is the first step I need to take? It doesn't have to be the perfect plan, but you have to get something in motion. What's the first step I need to take, all right, to make this change? Because if you don't have each of these variables solved for, you never will overcome resistance to change. All right. It's impossible. If any of these is a 0, this is a multiplication equation. If any of these is 0, anything times 0 is 0. So the greater the value of each of these, the greater opportunity you have to overcome resistance to change. So when you're looking to change, okay, either yourself or a staff person or even your kids, okay, I've used it on my kids. You want to use Gleich's formula for change. So there's in here, I gave you guys a worksheet also, very big into worksheets. You want to list, okay, what's the dissatisfaction or pain at the moment? What's the vision? If I make this change, why are things going to get better? What's the vision? All right. And what first step do I need to take to get there? You guys are already doing it. Okay. You guys are looking to grow your business. This is a first step. All right. You're getting involved in a webinar. You're asking for mentorship. You're doing all these things. It's the first step. It's not the end. It's the first step. All right. So you're dissatisfied where you're at right now with your business to some extent. All right. You want to grow it. You have a vision as to where you want to go, and you're going to take the first step. All right. Do that. Do this worksheet. Fill it in. And I'm telling you, okay, when you're trying to get a staff person to change, or even trying to convince yourself to make a change, if you go through this process, okay, it'll become a lot easier to overcome any resistance. All right. With that, we'll do a quick recap. All right. Clarity is key. All right. Spend time creating that vision, where you're at, where you want to go, obstacles, resources, all the things we talked about earlier. Clarity is key. Create an absolute vision of your life in 3 years. All right. Focus on your strengths and turn your weaknesses into strengths just by flipping them around on that worksheet. All right. But leverage your strengths. Create your one-page plan. Get focused and overcome any kind of resistance to change. Use the formula I just gave you. It absolutely works. I'm done. Any questions? Susanna, how do we do?
We did perfectly, actually. And this is huge. This is, I think this is like digesting like a 6-course meal. We're gonna have to stick with this. This is like Thanksgiving dinner, right? We're gonna have to digest this for a while because I think you kind of gave us a giant set of steps towards helping us, you know, look into the near future of our businesses. So I loved all of this. What did you guys think?
Very good.
Yeah, this is awesome. Awesome. Glad I was here.
Thanks. Well, if anybody has any issues or difficulties or struggles, you know, with some of the stuff we talked about, you can give me a call, shoot me a text, email, whatever the case might be. I'm happy to. It's a small group, okay? If there was a whole bunch of people in here, I wouldn't be able to make that offer. But the bottom line is, right now, at this moment, okay, there's only a handful of people on the line, which is fine, and I appreciate the time you spent with me. But as you can tell, I love business, okay, and I love helping people grow their businesses. So feel free, if you'd like to reach out, you know, for just a consultation, that's fine. No charge. I'd love to help you get along to the next level.
And for the person who's on the phone, can you just kind of say out your email address?
That was Debbie, right?
Yes.
Yep. So we have that. I have that. I can get you. I'll send it to you.
Thank you.
Okay. And so thank you, Nick, very much. And we have this recorded. I'm going to stop the recording now.